Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the meeting of the Second Planning Committee. We're not expecting a fire of the day, but in the event of alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather in the car park at the time. I'm advised to inform you that this meeting is live streamed and recorded. But I also ask you to please ensure your mobile phone is switched off. Finally, ensure members of the committee and all those raised by public speakers or raised in debate across the room. I must advise you that I will not tolerate any constructive behavior. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and the such behavior does take place and persist as a real meeting. I will now ask members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Sorry, I want to represent Bradley Division.
Tony Parsons, I'm councillor of the Basin and Collins.
Karen Rosie. Living Church Catholic Programs. Vivian Parry, Lord South. Not Alton.
Alton from all around.
Councillor McKenna, Mayvale Ward. Richard Marshall, Workfield.
Thank you. I'm Ian Evans, Chair of this committee, and Councillor Church Secretary.
Ladies and gentlemen, Roger was speaking on an item on the agenda for Shropshire Council for the London Division.
Thank you. That's a management.
Richard also used the plan tonight is development manager. Very French.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. Apologies, Madam President. We substitute Rosie Parry. We're minister of the meeting, on the 10th of August, and we recite amendments in minutes. Reporting the subsequent amendment, we are proposing the minutes. Thank you. Secondly. Thank you. All in favour, please. Thank you, that's carried. Other questions? There are no other questions. Disclosure of key interest. No, okay. Right, I'm going to amend this order to the agenda because one of some members has to leave. So I'm going to take items power station first. No traffic. All in favour of that, please? Thank you. So we'll now move the power station before we go on to the next. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. This is really just a little further explanation. Council needs to advise to see that the application is coming back for committee on 20th of September, and there has been a material change which is required to give members the opportunity to decide whether or not the change is sufficient to address concerns and refusal resolution from the 10th of August committee. We had originally prepared a refusal notice to go out following on from the 10th of August meeting. There was a legal challenge to a procedural issue occurring on the 10th of August, whereby an notice was made prior to the issue during the meeting. And the applicant objected to that, lodged a legal change. We reviewed that change, decided that the decision would still be issued, and that there was an alternative redress for that. To appeal process. However, by the time we received that promise, it then became apparent that a material change was submitted by the applicants. And obviously, we then sought additional legal advice, and that indicated that the application should be reported back to committee. I just want to emphasise this is an unusual situation, and not normally the minute that a committee makes a resolution, but we acted upon. In this case, it's a unique combination of circumstances which in no way implies any precedent regarding how future applications will be considered. So, according to the application, go back to the 20th of September, detailed report considering the proposed amendments, providing updated comments from all consultees will be circulated to members this Friday. The amendments relate specifically to issues upon which the committee resolved to refuse the application that do not involve any physical changes to the application, which would trigger the requirement for a new wider public consultation. Notwithstanding this, relevant consultees have been consulted and a full copy of the proposed amendments has been published on the Council's website. So the current verbal update is just for information only, and members will have full opportunity to discuss the proposals on the 20th of September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Brandon, do you wish to add any comments? Or?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move on to Councillor Tyndall.
Yes, it is purely a coincidence, although perhaps it's a happy one. I shan't be here on the 20th of September, but Councillor David from London has agreed to be my substitute.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, we'll now move on to the agenda item of the bungalow at Raglan. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this first application is an application for the erection of an agricultural implement storage building on land south of the bungalow at Raglan, Shropshire. You'll see a plan there. Apologies, I don't know why we couldn't get the IT working with the big screen, but you will see the site outlined in red, the application site outlined in red in the centre of that plan, which is immediately south of the property where the cursor is at the moment. That's the bungalow, that's the applicant's property, and you will see that they own that field around the property, which includes a pond in this part of the field. This is the application site in a bit closer detail. So again, this is the bungalow. This is the area in which the building is proposed, with an axis which has been created at this point here. Again, note the pond here, and there is a line coming down from the pond, which is a partial line of a watercourse running south from the pond. So that's a similar plan, but showing the proposed building in situ. So, and that plan shows the extent of the building. So you'll see it's effectively two buildings joined together. One an open frontage storage area, and then one a lean-to running off the one side. So this plan shows the application site, the application building here in the bottom right-hand corner of that plan, with the hard standing and the access. The bungalow here with the applicant's existing property, the pond, and then the watercourse which runs down here, and at this point here has now been culverted, so it runs in a pipe to this point here. So from this point to this point is now underground in a pipe, and would be situated under the building as it's proposed to be constructed. But that work has already been undertaken. This plan shows the intended machinery to be stored in the buildings. I won't dwell on that plan, but it shows that it's intended to be used for agricultural storage. Again, plan showing hard standing around the building and the building itself in the southern part of the site. Sorry, I should have, if I go back to that plan. At this point here, so immediately south of the bungalow, but to the northwest of the proposed building, is the applicant's septic tank, which I'll be referring to later on, and that drains to a soakaway down to the southwest. So it kind of it crosses the culverted watercourse, but of course the two aren't connected. So moving forward. I'll just quickly take you through some photographs. So this is looking from the field down towards the applicant's property, which is the bungalow here with the conservatory on the back. In the distance, you'll see another property, which is Ragdon Manor. This is a look from the north, looking southwards down the line of the watercourse running from the pond. The watercourse that's culverted further down. This is the looking back up the line of a public footpath towards the bungalow here at this point. So the building would be in the centre of that building, in the centre of that photograph, if you like, between the bungalow and the trees on the right hand side. That photograph shows the pond that's in situ higher up the field. This photograph shows a head wall at the point at which the watercourse is culverted, so it continues underground in the pipe and actually discharges at this point here. The photograph on the right hand side, you'll see the pipe. There's a pipe here, and it discharges into kind of the corner, the southeastern corner of the field, or just beyond the field. This is the access into the proposed building. That's the bungalow, and there is an overhead satellite image of the property. Again, the pond is there. You can clearly see the line of the watercourse at this point here. And finally, this is a photograph taken from Ragdon Manor, which shows, I'll come on to this again shortly, but it shows the location of their borehole, which is in the foreground, and in the background, across the road, you can see the fencing around the septic tank and a tractor, I think, in the field, the applicant's field. I think that's the end of the slides it is. So I will go back and then just take you through quickly through the report. Sorry, I should mention, I don't know how well you can see on that plan, there was been a previous application for a building on this site, which was refused in September 2018. It was for a larger building, and so on this plan you can see the building as it's currently proposed in kind of a brown colour, and then the outline either side of that is the extent of the building as it was originally approved and refused in 2018. So you can see the current building has a smaller footprint and is lower than the building previously refused. We'll leave that plan up because I think that might assist with the just running through the report. So at 1.6 of the report, you will see that the reasons for refusal of the previous application are set out there. The reasons 2 and 3 of that refusal have subsequently been overcome in officer's opinion by the current applications. So yeah, our members were minded to refuse the current application. We would not recommend that you include reasons relating to access and relating to ecology. You will see from the report at 4.1 that the parish council have objected to the proposal. They've objected on a number of grounds, but they're concerned about the visual impact and the need for the building and the fact that it's going to, it's visible from a wide area, including public footpaths, and therefore is justified. Importantly, at 4.2, you will see the comments from our flood and water management team, who have not raised any objection to the proposal, despite the fact that it includes building over the culverted watercourse. As I say, that work's already been done, and it's unauthorised work, so it did require consent. It hasn't got the necessary consent, which has obviously raised issues in terms of something else that I'll refer to shortly. But the flood and water management team have said, notwithstanding the fact that it's not consented and they wouldn't encourage the culverting of that watercourse, they're not concerned by the proposal and don't intend to take any action about the work that's already been undertaken. The proposal, as I understand it, does not involve any further work to that watercourse or further culverting of the watercourse. So the comments from the flood and water management team are quite extensive there, and they deal with a number of issues. Importantly, one of those issues that it refers to is the fact that one of the neighbouring properties, Ragdon Manor, which is to the east, sorry, the south-east of the application site, has raised serious concerns that the work already undertaken to the watercourse is causing pollution or pollution to their borehole, which is their only water supply to the property. There have been a large number of documents and details submitted around that, and whether or not it is as a result of what the works that have taken place. Ultimately, though, it's not really part of the consideration that you have before you today. The work has already been undertaken. We, as the Water Authority, have decided that we don't intend to take any action. And as I said, there are no further works proposed to that watercourse, so there have been no objections raised in terms of its impact on the watercourse, and the flood water management team have, as I say, have raised no objection on that basis. There is some dispute over how often the water flows down the watercourse. There is a rise in the watercourse before it gets to the culverted area, such that the water is held back for a time anyway until it becomes sufficient to overrun that rise, and therefore there is some kind of dispute, I suppose, about the amount of times that the water runs down that watercourse and out of the outfall to the culverted element in that corner, in that southeastern corner of the field. There have been a number of other objections and a number of other supporting comments that are again set out in section 4.6 of the report, sorry, 4.7 of the report. You'll note also 4.7.2, there's been an objection from the Ramblers. As I say, some submissions in support of the application and a number of submissions objecting in terms of the visual impact, as well as the borehole element that I've referred to. The fact that some of the unauthorised work has been carried out to the watercourse, and the fact that, again, the visual impact of the proposed building. I think, Chair, at this stage, I don't intend to say much else, but I'm obviously happy to try and answer questions that members might have about the proposal. I think it's important that members are advised that they stick ideally to the debate about whether or not this building is appropriate in this location. The kind of the issues about the watercourse and the potential pollution of the borehole essentially are a matter between neighbours, and not something that can be sorted out as a result of the planning application that's before you at the moment. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out at the end of the report. Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Now got 4 speakers on this. I've got Nicola Yaden. If you'd like to address the committee, please. There's a speaker's table at the far end. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Members of the committee, this site is not part of an agricultural holding or otherwise related to a working farm, small holding, established business or operation. Mr. and Mrs. Morris do not farm. An agricultural holding should be at least 5 hectares. This site is 1.5 hectares. This includes the bungalow, the garage, the wildlife pond and all the hard standing and the proposed development. It is a domestic house. Surely this building can't be used for agricultural use, as this was highlighted by the parish council. As it is too big for domestic use, a garage or a non-storage shed that would be associated with the house, what is it intended for? The building is therefore contrary to planning policies in open countryside. Positioned amongst traditional stone and tile buildings, we acknowledge the building has been reduced in size, but it still remains a very large building compared to anything nearby. The development is protrusive, obtrusive and visually dominant due to its elevation in open countryside. This is one of the reasons it was refused in 2018. It was also refused because it did not meet the special qualities of the Shropshire Hills AONB. Most worrying for us is our borehole is located below the proposed development, a distance of 39 metres from the corner of the proposed development. We have confirmation by a senior hydrogeologist at WSP, together with a borehole installation company. It is likely the work to the watercourse will cause bacterial contamination to our water. There is a risk of infiltration from the applicant's septic tank reaching our borehole. We have not been able to drink or cook with our water since this report. There is no mains water. Our borehole, which is registered, is our only supply. We are having to bring water in. The applicants have broken the law and filled in a watercourse without consent, putting in a 150 ml pipe to cope with the floodwater, which is likely to overspill in extreme weather, as stated by Bruce Bartlett, Senior Engineer, Flood, WSP. In an email sent on the 27th of July, this was sent after undertaking a site visit. There's no mention of this email in the committee report. It does not agree with the applicant's report. This development is going to increase the flood risk in Rector. Watercourse. How can a development be allowed on top of a watercourse if a 3-metre easement either side is a condition? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got Graham Watts from the Parish Council. Right. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
I'm not really quite sure how to follow that. That was excellent. It basically took all my arguments and put them very succinctly, so now I'm a bit floundering. What I would say is it goes back to the size of the development. I know it's smaller than it was previously put in as an application. However, it's still incredibly outsized given the size of the plot, which I know there's going to be a tractor and a harvester baler in there. However, given the size of the plot, it would be much more appropriate if it was a ride-on lawnmower. There is no requirement to keep this kit on this property. They don't farm. I don't know why they've got the kit. Maybe they've got the kit so they can build the barn. I just don't know. I think it's very unfair on the neighbours, and I think it detracts from the area. I would really, really be grateful if the application was turned down. Thank you.
Thank you. The local member is Cecilia Motley, and solicitor's got a letter to read out from Councillor Cecilia Motley.
So I'll read out Cecilia Motley's statement, which is as follows. This latest application has taken a long time to come to committee. Members will note that the original application in 2018 was withdrawn, and a subsequent one in the same year refused, since both applications were considered unsuitable and overbearing in a small hamlet with no other agricultural buildings, and thus did not meet the provisions of policies CS5, CS6, CS17 and MD12. The application before you differs from the previous two in that the proposed size of the agricultural building is reduced in height from 5 metres to 4.3 metres by 13.5 metres. However, it is still a very substantial structure and would stand prominently in the protected landscape of the OMB. Members will note the objection from the Ramblers Association that such a prominent structure would be highly visible from the footpath from Chelmwick. There is considerable puzzlement, as expressed by Eton and Hope Bowdler Parish Council, as to why such a substantial building is required for a holding of 1.25 hectares. The Parish Council was also concerned about the proposed non-permeable hard standing increasing water runoff, and I note the officer's comment that there appear to be no details of how the new building will be drained. However, the most contentious aspect of this application is still the issue of drainage, given the effect of positioning a large building over a watercourse, thus requiring culverting with a newly installed 150mm pipe, and the likely runoff effects on the other properties, given the steepness of the terrain at Ragdon. The nearest neighbour at Ragdon Manor has expressed serious concerns of the effect of potential runoff on the borehole at her property, which is the property's sole water supply. Whilst the drainage report states that little runoff would reach the installed pipe from the pond at the top of the property, this does not take into account potential effects of heavy and persistent rainfall, such as has been experienced over the last 2 years. Unfortunately, calculating for a 1 in 100 year flood event is no longer viable when climate change is a growing threat. I fear the drainage report is speculative and does not make stringent proposals to cover potential flooding events, nor do I see sufficient evidence to justify the need for what is still a large agricultural building on such a small area of land. I would therefore request that members refuse this application on the grounds that it still fails to meet the provisions of CS5, CS6, CS17 and MD12.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like Andrew Goff, the agent for the applicant, please. Thank you. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Andy Goff. I'm a drainage consultant for the application. As you can imagine, the applicants are quite at a loss to understand why the application is taking such a long time to consider, given that it's a small and modest agricultural shed. But they are obviously grateful for the support from the council officers and consultees on the application. The building before you for determination is not large. It seems perfectly reasonable for somebody to want to construct a building to keep agricultural machinery, if that's their pleasure, in the present layout, where they lie out in the open, rusting and deteriorating at present. There's been a lot of correspondence, site meetings and details on the matter of the ditch course, and I have provided detailed responses to all requests, which clearly show that this does not pose any additional flood issues, even on the rare times when water may actually be present in the culverted watercourse. I would add that on the original meeting with the drainage team, that this was called an engineered channel, not a watercourse, and that has now been changed to a watercourse, but nonetheless, it's still open for use and the flows can still flow through it. The details that we provide take account of the whole catchment area for the pond, and into the ditch course from that pond. And from our estimations, which have been concurred with by the drainage team, is that the pipe will not reach half capacity, even in the 1 in 100 plus climate change storms. Mention has been made in detail for the borehole from the neighbour's property in relation to the septic tank and the ditch. The septic tank to the bungalow was installed probably 30 years prior to the installation of the borehole. So then it does make you question what comes first. Should the applicant now take out their septic tank to accommodate a borehole that's been installed, whether that's correctly or not? There has been conversation regarding the seals on that unit, but there's obviously no material change in flows from the septic tank. They go a different direction completely, and they have been doing so for the last 30 plus years. Okay, but nonetheless, the septic tank issue has nothing to do with this committee and nothing to do with this application. Lastly, the access to the site was constructed under a section 184 of the Highways Act and is outside of this application also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you want to come back with anything, Tim? Or?
So just pointed out on this plan.
Yeah, I should have pointed out on this plan. As I said, these arrows indicate the fall of the land, so the land is falling this way away at this point, which is why the septic tank is down here. The proposal is to include a new soakaway here at this point to serve the proposed building. No, I'm happy to just answer questions on each area rather than say anything further. Thank you.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to clarify the size of the building, the height of the building, because in the Ramblers' objection, they talk about a 5 metre high building. But I think in Cecilia Motley's statement, that it said that it had been reduced from 5 metres to 4.3 metres, and I just wondered which one of those it was.
The dimensions of the building are set out in 6.2.5 of the report. The previous application, the height was 5 metres, the current one is 4.3.
Councillor Tindall, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The septic tank drainage field and the borehole, I think, although I can quite understand the concerns of the owner of the borehole, I think they are actually irrelevant. If the septic tank predates the borehole by some 30 years, I don't really think we can go back and revisit that. The second point I'd like to make is that the watercourse presumably is taking pond water, which might have a bit of contamination, but it's not polluted water. And therefore, if a building is put on top of a pond constructed culvert, there really shouldn't be any mechanical reason why that should fail. It's a question of whether the bore, which is, I think, 150 mil of the culvert, is adequate to take a once in a lifetime overflow from the pond. I appreciate that there's a rise in the ground of the coursal of the ditch, which means that the water will back up into the pond before it goes over the ridge. So I think the water course that's been carved is also irrelevant. So what is the purpose of this building and what is its function in relation to a plot of land which is just over 1 hectare? I'm afraid I forgot to bring my laptops, I can't check. Is it actually agricultural holding? Registered as such?
I don't know whether it's registered.
No. Well, can we, for the purposes of this discussion, but not necessarily for the purpose of the decision, assume that it is not agricultural holding in the true sense of the word, i.e. it's not registered DEFRA. It's not obviously a horticultural unit. So what activity is going on this 1+ hectares of land that justifies what is really quite a substantial farm building, if it's on a farm or even a horticultural unit? And I think I'm right in saying there would be no permitted development rights for this building because the size of the plot of land that it serves is too small. I think you've got to be 5 hectares before you can have the permitted development right to build an agricultural building, and then you have to have the planning authority's consideration. I forget what it's called now, pre-land. You don't have to apply for planning permission necessarily, but you have to advise the planning authority that you want to build that agricultural building, which in turn is going to serve a whole lot more than 5 hectares. So what is it that's going on in this farm, in inverted commas, that actually justifies such a large agricultural building? I mean, if it's going to contain a hay bale, a baler, another tractor, and then a smaller shed, another tractor, an antique tractor, I mean, that's quite a lot of machinery on the into accumulate. So unless I could be persuaded that the occupiers of the bungalow and the surrounding land are actually agricultural contractors, and therefore they need somewhere to store their machinery, I am not convinced that this building is needed per se, and if it's not needed, then I think it's a new build in the countryside which should be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. Councillor Afford, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Tyndall's probably touched on what information is I'm seeking. At what point, I've always been led to believe that you don't have to show a lot of agricultural justification for building. Parish Council stated it would be more suitable to a ride-on lawnmower than agricultural machinery. So that slightly concerns me. Are they running a contracting business? To what point do they have to show the justification? One area that does concern me is obviously the borehole. Is it the fact that there's been infill to a ditch, which has increased the risk from a septic tank, which may lead to pollution to the borehole? Or is it the material that's been used that does lay risk to any potential contamination to a borehole? The other point is I would just like to make a couple of applications in my divisions for agricultural building under ARG. At what point does an application have to be a full application as opposed to be considered under an ARG application? Thank you, Chair.
We come back then, please, Tim.
Yeah, contrary to what one of the speakers said, an agricultural holding doesn't have to be 5 hectares or greater. It can be less than 5 hectares. In planning terms, there is a distinction between a holding that is less than 5 hectares and one that's more than 5 hectares. And if it's greater than 5 hectares, then you can potentially put up a new agricultural building without the need for planning permission, but you have to go through a notification process, which is the AGR process that you refer to. If you're less than 5 hectares and you want to put up an agricultural building, then you have to apply for planning permission. Hence the application in this instance. But I would just say, I mean, I'm hearing what members are saying in terms of need and justification. There has been, in some of the representations made, statements made that the field has never been used for, or hasn't been used recently for agricultural purposes. But if I take you to that aerial shot, which was a relatively recent shot as I understand it, you can see quite clearly there that the field has been kind of mown and used for some purpose, and clearly that's probably larger than you would use for have a sit-on mower. And indeed, in fact, in some of the other photographs, you quite clearly see a tractor present, including the photograph supplied by one of the objectors, which shows the tractor in the background. So clearly the applicant does have some agricultural equipment, which they do intend to store in the building. Members may have their own opinion on whether that building is too large, but that is fact. And I would just direct members to condition 7 of the report, which does state that the building shall only be used for agricultural purposes, but shan't be used for the accommodation of livestock and manure, because obviously it is very close to other residential properties, but it would be restricted to agricultural use. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tindley, will you come back in?
Yes, I don't know, Tim, whether you were referring to my address, but I certainly wasn't implying with an agricultural holding, it has to be more than 5 hectares. I was just trying to explain rather poorly compared with your explanation that you don't always need planning permission to put up a building on a holding that's more than 5 hectares, unless you're within 400 metres of a 20 people going to have cattle there or something. So I think I'm on the right line, sorry, but I certainly didn't want to give the impression that something less than 5 hectares could never be an agricultural. That's clearly not the case, particularly if you think of horticultural units, which are in effect holdings. They could be just, simply tenants. That looks like, like an half hay. So I would accept that has been an agricultural activity. We're looking at the aftermath after a hay crop has been taken on. But if you were the owner of that plot land, would you really invest in this building and have all that kit for mowing a hectare of grass?
Thank you, Robert.
I mean, you get a contractor to follow and do it for you. I personally think that this building is unnecessary, it's too large, and it's in the wrong place as far as the village is concerned.
I'd like to ask the officer, please. This roadway here that runs down the side, that goes to all the other buildings that runs further along the site. This roadway that's on this, yes, it does.
Sorry, because it's water.
I want to know what that roadway was. Was it a temporary road? Was it something that was just an agricultural road, or is it a permanent road to all the other buildings?
It serves a number of other properties as far as I'm aware. It certainly serves Bragdon Man.
Yes, I'm quite surprised actually, because I just had something come up on my patch where the officer completely turned down something like this and said that there should not be agricultural machinery or animals anywhere near a road or near the buildings. I know that it's being done the other way around and they want to build a new house next to the roadway and also the agricultural buildings with the machinery inside, and they've got farm cattle and different things. But it makes me just wonder, I've looked at the list of things that I put down, and it makes me just wonder whether this maybe is a building that could be changed in future years for something else. Is that a possibility? It could be asked to come back to planning, could it be put up as a building where people could live?
Well, of course, that would require planning permission, so they'd have to make a planning application to do that.
Yes, but these people are not farmers. And looking at all the list of machinery, which is quite extensive, it makes me just wonder, if they're not farmers, why would they want all that amount of machinery? It's just, maybe it's me being cynical, or maybe I just don't trust people nowadays, but there we are. So those are the questions I'd like to ask. I know the one that I'm talking about went to an inspector, and they should, you know, the one that is similar to this, he took it out as well. So I'm just wondering if it's going to be something else.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Higley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am undecided on this one at the moment, although I do see all the relevant points. A couple of points I just wanted to make. We're told by officers that the newly installed culvert is not to be considered as part of the deliberations of this application. In some ways I can understand that, and yet this proposed building couldn't go ahead without the watercourse being changed. The watercourse has been changed, and from a personal point of view, I always am quite annoyed when work takes place on a site and then an application is put in. I think it's on 4.2 that the condition in the committee report suggests prior to above ground works taking place, a scheme of surface water drainage should be submitted to and approved. But some of this surface water drainage has perhaps already been subject to works, and I just think it's disappointing that we're considering something after it's happened. I also do place a lot of importance on the AONB. I note the comment that there's no other agricultural buildings in this area, and the only thing that I feel about that is we're suffering from a disadvantage at the moment of not being able to visit these sites. And if we'd have gone and stood on this site, the proposed site, and looked around in all directions, I think we would have a better understanding of the surroundings and the way that we should be considering this application. But I do have concerns that a building, all right, it's been reduced in size from the previous application. I'm concerned a building of this size should be put in a hamlet which, from the pictures that we've seen, don't seem to have any other agricultural buildings, and that's what Councillor Motley said, so that does concern me. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. As a committee, it's not for us to sit here and judge whether they actually need the machinery, nor to solve the dispute between the neighbours with the watercourse. I think what we need to be looking at is whether this building is proportionate within the area of natural beauty that it's been put forward for. When we look at the measurements, and we also look at the slope of the land, which does slope up to where it's being built, this is going to be a fairly significantly substantial building that will actually be quite an eyesore. We look at what the Ramblers had to say. I also agree with Councillor Parry a little bit. I'm possibly sceptical. When we look back at a previous application, there was business use mentioned in that application. That was later withdrawn out of the application. I'm minded to think here, we've got the size of the plot, so they need the machinery or not, to say that's not our business. But I am fearful that a change of use will go in once the building has been passed. And I actually don't think that that building is within keeping of the area, so I actually will not be supporting the application.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Anybody else wish to come back? Councillor Tyndall? Oh, Councillor Duff first.
Yes,
Councillor Duff.
I have some sympathy with Councillor Marshall's view that what it's, I think you expressed what's used for, or it is actually relevant, the size of the buildings, the size of the plot. It's always been described as an agricultural building. So a building serves agriculture, or form of agriculture is it serving. Otherwise, anybody with a patch of land could put up a big building without justifying the need agriculturally for it. So I won't be supporting this. However, if the committee decides by a majority vote to accept the officer's recommendation, could we please have, and I know it's a hoary old chestnut for longer serving members of this committee, that the colour of the roof is 18B29, please.
Councillor Duff, please, now Councillor briefly. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Chairman. I too have concerns regarding the size of the property, being as it is, if you could call it a small holding at 1.5 hectares, and that it is a very large agricultural building, and there doesn't appear to be any signs that the occupants of the bungalow actually can do agricultural work. So I'm also inclined to this application on those grounds due to it being susceptible to a reaction of products just like an agricultural building.
Councillor Lumby, please.
I've got two hobby farmers that live either side of me. They've got very small property and lots and lots of equipment that they enjoy polishing. Now, I have got 3 ride-on lawnmowers that are in the garage, and I polish them as well. But why do I have 3 when I only need 1?
I don't think that's for this committee to decide on, either me or this application. I'm glad that the officers want to remove the issue of the bore, because whilst it is pertinent to the occupant of it, the owner of it, it shouldn't be in this application. As to size, I actually personally think that it is now reasonable as what the third application or second application is, and it has reduced. With regard to the ramblers, I'm not sure that was an objective report, because as well as saying the relevance of when they were rambling along past it on the footpath, they then go into all sorts of other issues that I don't think was for the ramblers to comment on. Thank you.
But anybody else wish to say anything, please? Wish to come back, Tim? No?
Just to say, Chair, I think you're right in terms of need. That really isn't the factor that you should be considering, but clearly the size of the building is, and the visual implications. So if members are moving towards somebody moving towards the potential refusal, then you would need to, I suggest, stick to the size of the building rather than anything referencing anything to do with need in the reason. But that was all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to make a proposal? Right, would you like to make a proposal from the chair? This application will be refused on the visual impact of the area and on the intrusion of the neighbours' property, and the planning policy CS5, CS6, CS17, and all the applications that it doesn't comply with. Could I have a seconder of that proposal, please? Right, the first proposal and the seconder, all those in favour, please. And that application is refused. Thank you. Can we have the cap? Councillor Hubbard abstention. One abstention.
So Chair, so through you, so just to clarify, so essentially the reason is effectively the same as the first reason on the last refusal.
Okay. Right, we now come on to item number 6, which is the bowling green at Ford.
This is an outline application for the erection of 2 dwellings on land at Ford, which was formerly a bowling green, as you will see from the description of the application. So just to describe where we are, Ford is some way to the east of this site, which is on a junction between the main road to Welshpool and the road running north, adjacent to a property called the Smokestop, which I'll show you in some photographs shortly. You will see from this plan the application site outlined in red here in the centre of the plan, and around that you have a number of residential properties. Across the road, across this lane, you have the Smokestop, which is a pub restaurant. And these 2 properties here, which are a pair of bound dwellings, bound conversions. Across the road also you've got one additional property. So the application is in outline with all matters reserved other than the point of access into the site. Currently, there is a vehicular access into the site, which is more at the northern end of the frontage to this lane, and again, I'll show you that in some photographs shortly. The proposal is to move the access south to more of the centre of the frontage, with an access in here serving 2 properties. And again, you'll see on this plan that there are neighbouring properties to the site, and here's the main A458 Welshpool Road. So I'm going to take you through a series of photographs. So this is on the lane, looking back towards the Watercourse Road. You will see that the site is quite well screened by conifers, essentially on the boundary here. There's a gap in in those conifers. That's close to where the proposed access would be. It might be slightly further to the left of that, but it's intended to put the new access into that site close to that point. This is looking down the Watercourse Road towards Shrewsbury. You'll see there's a footpath extends along the site frontage, and that takes you back down towards the village of Ford, past Dinky's Diner, if anybody knows where that is. This is looking across the road, so on the left-hand side of that photograph you've got the smokestop. The lane off which it is proposed to get access into the site is in the centre of that photograph. There are some existing buildings on the northern part of the site. This gate here is the main vehicular access into the site at present. As I say, there are some existing buildings to the north of that, which obviously would be removed as part of any development. Those are the same buildings looking in through the existing gated access. And that's looking into the main body of the site itself. You'll note the neighbouring property in the distance there, which has no windows directly overlooking the application site. There are certainly no windows at first floor level or above. So I'm just going to run through the site. This is this fence forms the northern boundary of the site. And then we're running round with that's the neighbouring property that I've just referred to in one of the previous photographs. And we're just running around the site. This is the boundary to the lane down this side with the gap in the hedge, in the conifers that you can see there. This is looking towards the Watercourse Road, and again, just note the screening. The site is well screened from both of the surrounding highways. Again, just showing the extent of the conifer hedge around the site. So this is looking from the road junction, from the main road, looking back towards the site. Again, that's the potential point of access. It might be slightly further left of that, but that shows the lane that the access would be served from. Looking from across the Watercourse Road, again, the site is well screened from that highway. Again, that's looking across at the junction from across Watercourse Road, and that's looking in westerly direction down Watercourse Road past the smokestop and the turn into Albury Bridge. Sorry. So that's the extent of the photograph. Just to take you again briefly through the report for this. It's important to state at this point that Ford is not a settlement that's designated for any new development, and this in any event, as you'll see from the plan on the front of your committee report, this site sits some way to the west of the main body of Ford, although as you'll have seen from the photographs and see from the plans, it is within a cluster of properties around the road junction with the lane that loops back into Ford. You see from the report that so that in principle development shouldn't be allowed on this site unless there are material circumstances or material considerations that would lead you to a different conclusion, and I'll come back to that shortly. But you'll see objective.
Too loud.
Want me to just carry on, Chair? Yeah. the Parish Council have objected to the proposal on the basis that it's in open countryside, and they're concerned that they can't see the detail about the application as well. There are a number of consultee responses there, none of which raise issue with the proposal. I would direct you to the comments of Sport England, who haven't directly objected to the proposal, but have set out the considerations that need to be taken into account in terms of the fact that this was at one time a bowling green. There's only been one letter of objection from the public, and the issues raised therein are set out in paragraph 4.9 of your report. So I would ask that members make themselves familiar with those concerns. As I've said, the proposal is in outline only, with only the access up for consideration at this point. So all of the other reserved matters and the detail of the application would need to be subject of a further application, and obviously would be considered, the implications of that will be considered at that time. But I think you've seen from the plans that the site is clearly large enough to accommodate two dwellings in a manner in a form which is is probably complementary to the nature of the dwellings surrounding the site. You'll also see that the site has been well screened, so that visually the impact is going to be quite contained. I've no doubt that the dwellings would be visible, or the tops of the parts of dwellings would be visible on the site, but nevertheless they will be relatively well screened from public vantage points. Importantly, the applicants in this case have confirmed that, notwithstanding the fact that they're not obliged to contribute to affordable housing, they are prepared to make a financial contribution to the provision of affordable housing off-site, and this is a consideration which weighs kind of in one of the positives of the proposal. And that would amount to a figure of £34,650 as a contribution to the provision of off-site affordable housing. It's acknowledged that the proposal does involve the loss of a former bowling green, although it hasn't been in use since 2015, and you will have seen from the photographs that there is little evidence of the bowling green itself. Although the bowling green and the smaller infrastructure that was associated with that does mean that this would constitute previously developed land. It's not classed as a greenfield site. So, as set out in the conclusion to the report, the principle of development on this site is one that shouldn't be allowed unless there are the material considerations that would lead you to a different conclusion. I think in this case we have to say it's a very finely balanced judgment that officers are coming to, but we have concluded that in this particular case the positives do outweigh the negatives, and the recommendation is for approval. And in doing that, I think the positive things that were taken into consideration are that it does make the contribution to affordable housing. It's a small contribution to housing in total in the council's housing numbers. It is a very contained site that is well screened from surrounding properties and from public vantage points, and it is in a cluster of existing properties around a junction, which is a very common around the road junction, which is a very common form of development across the county. So, taking all of those things into consideration, we don't think that this would set, notwithstanding that it is strictly speaking contrary to policy, we don't believe that it would set a precedent for any other development, because obviously every application when it comes forward is considered on its merits. We believe that the circumstances for this particular case are such that we can recommend approval.
So, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
We've got some speakers on this. The first speaker is Alistair Horn, please, for the Parish Council of Ford. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Alistair Horn, I'm Vice Chair of Ford Parish Council. The Parish Council objects to this proposal as this site is in an open countryside, and the Parish Council wishes to remain as such in the local plan review. This position is a reflection of the views of the community too, as a local housing needs survey carried out recently concluded there is no requirement and a lack of appetite for further development in Ford. Indeed, the 2020 survey of all residents produced a 93.4% response objecting to further development in the community. The Parish Council make reference to the Planning Officer's own published appraisal, which states, and I quote, the site is outside the settlement of Ford, where open market housing will be contrary to adopted development policies relevant to local housing, including CS1, CS4 and MD1. The proposal also does not meet the criteria for residential development that would be permitted in the countryside under policies CS5 and MD7A, end quote. There is clear conflict with the requirements of adopted policies. The Parish Council is also concerned that an affordable housing payment of £34,650 under an S106 agreement is both unethical and specifically of no benefit to Ford, which already has an over-provision of local housing needs. The Parish Council makes reference to the Crossgates Meadow development of 32 affordable homes completed in 2020, where the Housing Association failed to fill these with local people. In addition, the Parish Council is also concerned that this is an outline rather than a full application, as the full detail of the proposal can't be assessed and could change significantly. With regards to the bowling green being a sports facility in the published report, Planning Officer states is not clear and it meets the definition of an existing open space or sports facility as set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. Yet in the local plan review recently passed by Shropshire Council, it most definitely is regarded as such. In fact, it was allocated a point score towards community hub status. Clearly, there is some discrepancy. In the report, Planning Officer described the site as having been previously developed as a bowling green with associated infrastructure, and as such, its redevelopment over greenfield sites is a clear aspiration of national planning guidelines. The Parish Council disputes whether the site should be classed as brownfield. Bowling Green had a removal structure, but as an open space is fundamentally greenfield. Further, the site is some distance outside the settlement of Ford and a significant walking distance from local amenities such as the church, the village hall and the village shop. This fact has been an issue on nearby sites that have gone to planning appeal. Fundamentally, the site is open countryside, both in SAMDEV and in the proposed local plan review. The Parish Council disputes the designation of Ford as a community hub, but this site would fall outside the development boundary, even if the hub was designated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I call on the local member, Roger Evans, and you have 5 minutes to speak, please, Roger.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Chairman. I'll put on the report that I was, am I on the speaker? Put on the report that I was neutral on this. However, reading the report in detail, I've voted against it and support the Parish Council. I'm puzzled, even concerned at the officer's recommendation. This is not a named settlement, it is outside the village. It is quite a way to the west of the village. There is a settlement, a named settlement to the east of the village named Chapel, where applications have been because it is not part of the village. There has also been an application in the recent past for building on land by the side of what was referred to as Dickie's Diner, which went to appeal. Shropshire Council turned it down and the appeal inspector turned it down. But it was so distant from the facilities that were made forward into a hub. bowling green, residents, community would still want it as a bowling green, but the owner of the site banned them off the site. It was designated a community concern site, I forget the actual words, but it was aged 6 months for the community to raise the funds to actually buy it. The owners of that site at that time wanted a 6-figure sum for this. A lot of money, 6-figure sum for it. The parish council put a bid together to buy the money, but in the end, due to the small size of the community, decided they just could not afford to continue to buy that site at that price. So it is wanted, and as it referred to by the previous speaker, in the proposed local plan, which was adopted by Shropshire Council in the middle of July, it is shown as a sports facility, and it earns points to making people take up. Orders are present down for over 100 houses built within it. It is disputed. There is proposed in the local plan a development boundary around the board, which in no way is anywhere near this site. It is a prominent site. It is a field there. It will be seen, and it will create a lot of precedent, and there will be a lot of pressure from within the community to own land to bring more sites forward. Sunday makes the whole of this area open countryside. The new local plan, as I say, draws a site boundary around Ford quite tightly, and it designates an actual field in Ford which can and should take some houses. This site came forward in the local plan, as did other sites that were all turned down by the planning department. So it is outside. I am surprised by this coming forward when I have known of other applications in similar circumstances all been turned down. Alternatives for this site is a bowling green, and it is wanted as a bowling green, and it used the facilities of the smokestop to assist it. The previously developed land and the buildings that were on it were wooden structures. And the wooden structures are on a disputed piece of land where the landowner has actually put an objection in and said that he owned the land where these buildings were. That may be the brownfield site, but it is not part of this site because that is under dispute and not part of planning applications report. So it raises all sorts of issues on this site. And I and everybody else just cannot understand why it has been recommended for approval. There is a contribution towards the affordable homes, but I would hope that this council is not making contributions towards affordable homes by its opinions. We've never done that before, and I would not want it to do now. It is contrary and outside it. Does it stand on its own or not? And it doesn't. No way, no way. And if this did go forward, I'm fairly sure there will be other applications in probably following, not far behind. So,
thank you, Roger. Thank you. Right, we have the agent to come and speak, and that's Stuart Thomas. Come and address the committee. And Stuart, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, Councillors, for the opportunity today. In respect to policy, obviously we fully acknowledge and respect that in planning policy terms, the site is located in open countryside. That isn't disputed. However, in practical terms, we do firmly believe the site is suitable for residential development for the following reasons. Firstly, the site does occupy a sustainable location. It is within walking distance of the village amenities, and it does also, however, we've seen from the photographs, a continuous footpath link along the roadside frontage. The site is well screened, it's contained infill site. It's located in the cluster of existing residential properties and immediately adjacent to popular pub restaurants. In addition, there can't be any doubt that the site is previously classified as previously developed land. Having been previously used as a bowling green, however, the bowling club did fold in 2015. I must point out to councillors that previously the site was offered, and this I must say was nothing to do with my clients or the applicant in this respect. Prior to the sale and purchase of the site, it was offered to the community, as you've heard from Councillor Evans, as a bowling green, but it was not taken up as such. Shropshire, in brownfield sites in Shropshire are, it's fair to say, few and far between, and policy would place a strong presumption in favour of development on such sites, which inevitably and correctly is always preferable than developments on green fields. On acquiring the site, the current owner and the applicant here originally wished to turn the site into a builder's storage yard, and actually I must point out there is a current live planning application with Shropshire which has been in since 2019 for the change of use of this site to a storage yard, a builder's storage yard, which planning officers are supportive of. We do, however, note that there are considerable objections to that application also, the parish council being one of them, and together with quite a considerable number of local objections. As a result, we've also got this application on the table for consideration, which is for two sensibly designed residential dwellings, which presents a low-key, sensibly designed scheme. We hear what's said about the application being in outline form only, but clearly there needs to be some certainty about the use of the site before any site owner or applicant wishes to develop architectural plans thereafter. We are looking only for this to be two properties, sensitively designed, and will ensure that there's no impact on residential amenity. Quite rightly, this committee and the council will get the opportunity to consider any subsequent reserve matters application if permission is forthcoming. I must also stress there's a commitment from the applicant to comply with the council's emerging policy and ensure high standards of sustainability, and a minimum of 10% of the predicted energy needs of the development will be from on-site renewable and low carbon sources. There are no technical objections to this application. All matters in respect of highways, drainage and ecology have been addressed, and as you heard, there was only one single letter of objection to the proposal. This is a genuine application advanced by the current owner of the site, and the belief that actually this is something that the community would have felt was preferable over alternative uses of the site relating to potential commercial uses, which are subjects of current applications, which also would be compliant with policy CS5 relating to economic development in the open countryside. We've heard that the applicant is prepared to offer a financial contribution. That's a genuine offer. It is a benefit, and it's perfectly right and proper that that is considered as part of the decision-making process, and that would be an affordable housing contribution, as you've heard, of £35,000. To conclude, this application will represent appropriate residential development. Ford is indeed coming forward or is proposed as a hub within the emerging local plan, albeit this site is outside it. And we would commend this application of residential development on appropriate brownfield sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. Jim, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to point out, Chair, the speaker there has just referenced the other site, which is true. There is an application in. He indicated that's got officer support. I think I have to say that's not the case. I think you can say at this point we're neutral on that application, but I have never indicated any support for that in that application, and it's not been brought forward on that basis. But I think you do need to, members do need to accept that, notwithstanding what one of the other speakers may have said, this is classed as previously developed land. Even just to have a bowling green on there, you would have to have proper drainage and engineering in to facilitate the construction of a bowling green, and it is classed as previously developed land. And on that basis, it potentially will need to come forward for some use at some stage in the future, whether that be this current application or for something else. But I deliberately didn't reference that previously, the existing application, because I didn't want it to sound like it was like any kind of threat or persuasion to the committee in terms of the recommendation for the current application. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Love, please.
Thank you, Chair. My first thoughts was when I was looking at your pictures that you were showing was about the access near the junction. I noticed highways haven't said anything, but I did think it looked like the junction was very close to the main junction. So I was wondering about, because I know the access is one of the things we're going to be considering, so I don't know what other people might think about that. But that was my first thought looking at it. And I just would go back to your point 6.11 here about the proposal doesn't meet the criteria for residential development that would be permitted in the countryside under policy CS5 and MD7A. So that does give me some concern that we might be setting precedents as well. Those are my thoughts, but I'm interested to hear what other people think as well on my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the affordable housing contribution, it's commendable, but I don't think it should be relevant in assessing this application. Likewise, I don't think that we should be looking at whether this brings forward any other planning applications close by, because each one will be assessed under its own merits, which has been suggested by the parish council. Looking at the site itself, it was offered for sale to the residents and the community to continue being used as a bowling green. Unfortunately, they couldn't raise the money for that for whatever reason, whether that was desire or whatever. And looking at the pictures, the site now does look relatively untidy. So to actually utilise it as a previously developed site to put 2 homes on there, which is quite sheltered as well from the trees around the side, it's more of an infill development, and I actually think that it would be a good use of a piece of land that can no longer be used as a bowling green.
Councillor Tyndall, please.
Thank you. I wanted to say I agree with the local member, Councillor Evans, that the contribution towards affordable housing shouldn't, and I would like Kim that correctly, it shouldn't be a consideration to be taken into account of planning applications such as this. And then, if I may speak after Kim's answer my question, please, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the affordable housing contribution is something that we'll be able to secure by way of the Section 106 agreement.
Sorry,
the affordable housing contribution is something that we'd be able to secure by a Section 106 agreement. So it would be a benefit that's offered, and you would be able to take that into consideration. So even though it's not a requirement for the policy of this stage, it's something that the applicant would be offering.
Okay, quite, Chairman, there where that leaves me. Are you saying that, I mean, it's nice to have the offer, but is it actually a material consideration?
Yeah, it would be something that you can assess into your planning balance. So if that would, whilst you're considering policy, if that consideration would tip your balance in favour of development, then it would be something you can take into consideration.
Right, thank you. So can I go on to my next point, which is that what are the exceptional circumstances that warrant this infill, which is in, I think we've all established that it's open countryside. I mean, it's a patch of land that is underused. Does that fact merit building on it? Sorry, that's a slightly rhetorical question, but I mean, the policy is a policy, unless there's very substantial reasons why we should depart from policy. And I accept that Tim Rogers said it's a finely balanced one. Well, to my view, it's finely balanced against approval. Yes, in favour of refusal.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very finely balanced application, in my view, and in my view as well. What's being proposed here, in any other circumstance other than being in open countryside, we would probably be approving. The 2 bungalows screened from the road and all the rest that goes with it. Particularly, and I don't think we should just wash away the fact that the developer's prepared to put in a contribution to affordable housing, because we've seen plenty other big developers that won't put in their share as far as that's concerned. So I think that is something that we should take account of. It's certainly not the deciding factor, but I don't think it should be just dismissed. And so, you know, it all comes down to whether this is open countryside. And we know that it is, but we've, again, had similar situations like this in the past, in Crockton and other places where, you know, are we in open countryside or aren't we in open countryside? I drive that road quite often, and when I get to the 40-mile-an-hour zone and the smokestack, I think I'm coming into Ford. And maybe I'm, misapprehension there, but it seems to me like I've left halfway house, passed route, and I'm coming into Ford. So I think it is very, very marginal, and I'm prepared to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Councillor Lumby, please.
Whilst I think the other application may be seen by some as a smoking gun, I think we have to be mindful that you can have two beautiful houses there, or you can have a builder's yard that's going to look really ugly next to the pub and next to the nice village of Ford. So I think that is a consideration. So because of that, I'll go with the two houses. Thank you.
Councillor Parry.
I want to look at it differently, actually, because this is right next to a main road, isn't it? I personally don't think this is open countryside. I know it is open countryside, but it's next to a main road. And the pub across the road, do they do bed and breakfast? Does anybody know? Do they do anything? I would have thought the pub would desperately need to have more housing near it. Looking at this, I know this is outlined. They could come back and say that they want more houses on this site, couldn't they? Is that a possibility? It's outline planned.
It's outlined.
They could come back and say they want more than 2 houses.
Yeah, it would require a further application.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like that about it. I personally think that it's a good site to beautiful houses on. And I think it would help the pub tremendously. It's in a good place. I can't see that the entrance is anything wrong with it. The only thing is, of course, it has been a bowling green, but it's not been a bowling green for quite a long time. And I'm another person that really would prefer not to have buildings somewhere where people are going to put all sorts of things on. I would rather look, as I'm driving along a very nice main road, to look at two beautiful houses that might be built on the side. The only problem is they could come back and say they want more housing on them. So I'm going to think about it before we get to the end. Thank you.
Councillor Harper, please.
Thank you, Chair. As Officer said, this is a fine balance. I can see some merit in allowing it if it was the wish of the parish council and the community. When it's in a state of fine balance, I think I will always take the view of the local community and the parish council. And I feel like I can support this. If it had been the other way, even though it's sitting outside a boundary, I may well have gone with it, so long as it could have been conditioned to develop houses that are in need, even if not affordable. But in this instance, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Tindall.
Yes, I don't know how much weight we should give to the fact that an alternative planning application has been submitted for a builder's yard. We don't know the outcome of that application. It could have been made to encourage us to approve this on the basis that 2 houses is best for one builder's yard. But I'm not sure that we should take that into account. I have now begun to hear the arguments in favour of approving this application, notwithstanding it's against policy, and I think it's still very finely balanced. I'm still not convinced that the unusual circumstances outweigh the policy.
Thank you. Do you want to come back to?
Just a couple of points of clarification, Chair. The other application has been in for a lot longer than, along the length of time than this application that's before you. And it has changed from its original submission. The original submission was for self-storage units, where you can lock up your belongings.
That was given permission.
No. But then it has subsequently been changed to kind of storage, and a builder shower has been mentioned, but for general storage, basically. But as I say, I don't think you should be giving weight to that one way or the other in terms of the determination of this application. And I can hear, and it's clear from members' debate, that it is finely balanced. As I said myself, that you could come down on either side of the argument. And similarly, it is open countryside. We have had appeal decisions that would both support and not support taking a view that it's because on what is clearly an infill plot, we've had inspectors' decisions that have come down on either side of that argument in locations that are outside settlements. So we have had occasions where inspectors have come down and stuck very much to the policy line and said it shouldn't be developed, and alternatively we've had other inspectors who've said it's clearly infill between existing properties. There isn't any harm or extension into open countryside per se, and have supported it. So, thank you.
Yes, one of the appeals that I'm sure Richard Hawkes is going to talk us through, the question of what is infill was neatly sidelined by the inspector. I make that comment because is it infill?
Yes, so that relates to infill at Gables Bank, I think that's we're reporting on later. But essentially that's an issue, that infill, how you interpret it, it does depend on the context of the settlement in question. That's a particular situation where it was a plot that would be added onto an existing plot that's had planning permission, but then was resulted in a very extensive non-built-up frontage, which was then out of character with that particular settlement. So it is very much the context you've got to look at when you talk about infill, and whether you consider it to be appropriate or not appropriate in a particular situation.
Councillor Parry, please.
So can we ask, if we do decide that we want these two houses, can we ask them to look a certain way? Can we say that we want certain things to be allowed with these two houses, that they have to be what we want it to look like? I mean, I'm not here, but it's very interesting.
Sorry, you can't do that at this stage, but what you could do if you were minded to approve the outline application is ask that the reserve matters come back before you as a committee, so it's not a decision that's delegated to officers, so you would then have your say on the final design.
So can you do that now? Can you say that now?
Well, only if somebody moves a recommendation to approve. But they could include it as part of that.
Can I say then, if we do approve this, it just has to come back to the committee and it has to be approved?
If you approve the outline, it comes back for material consideration, and that's when you make the comments. So if this is approved in outline, then it comes back for material consideration, which is design and everything else. So, could I have someone to make a proposal, please? Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I'll propose that this application is approved, subject to the fact that that when it comes back in detail, that it comes back to this committee for approval.
Marshall, please.
Yes, I'll second that motion, exactly as Councillor Parsons says.
Okay, we have a proposer and a second for the application outline, so it comes back here for material consideration in the next phase. So all those in favour of the outline application, please. 1, 2, 3. Against? Against? Abstentions? So that is carried, the outline has been approved. Thank you.
Jay, you might want to have a comfort break.
You have a comfort break, you like one Councillor Tindall? Yes.
It won't take very long.
No. Anyone else wish to council break? Thank you, Stuart. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you.
We are ready. Well, that's a bit harder work than you read. Oh, sorry. I've got to take it off and just hold it. Bend over, Rob.
Right, we come on to item number 8, schedule appeal, Richard. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just 3 to report on. First one is a proposal for a dwelling on land at Homer, which will not appeal dismissed. Homer as a settlement is not a community harbour cluster, it's in the countryside. This was on a parcel of garden land that reportedly has previously had a structure on it which may have been a squatter's cottage. It was knocked down in 2014. The inspector gave no limited weight to the brownfield complex there. Also commenting that it was not a conversion as the previous building no longer existed, and effectively building a replica didn't outweigh the fact that it would be contrary to both the policies of Shropshire plan and clearly much well not neighbourhood plan, clearly part of the development plan in that area. He also concluded that that site it would be harmfully cramped, adversely impacting on the AONB. We then have an appeal that's been lodged against a delegated refusal for a temporary cabin retention for another further 2 years, providing a farm office, meeting room and living accommodation at Nixon's Wood Church, Stretton. This scheme did give a temporary permission in 2018, with security in a contributing reason then, and they were intending to install upgraded systems, and that was why a temporary permission was given. Is a site that's actually used for a demonstration of calf feeding and rearing equipment. So in a sense, it's not one that needs a permanent on-site presence. So the refusal reasons by officers is related to it being open countryside, being contrary to housing policy, there being no essential agricultural need for a rural worker to reside at the location, and also the nature of the design, the retention of their structures for a further period is considered to be sort of harming the AONB. So again, that's a written representations appeal. And then we have an appeal that's been dismissed. which is for the site it's at east of 5 Gavels Lane, Bank Minsterley. This is one where the, again, it's a sort of cluster settlement, and where again we had issues over the numbers of houses in the settlement against the guidelines. It has had more permissions than the guideline, but that was not a factor that the inspector gave much weight to. He was more concerned here, again, with the nature of the site, considering that it would be leading to almost complete loss of openness in this particular area when it's taken into account existing permissions as well as the extant developments. And essentially, just he said there, infilling in this location would create an uncharacteristic linear rhythm of modern housing, a character more akin to a village or town. Short limits of development can be observed locally, including opposite, but the length of the continuous development that we created here will represent a significant departure from the prevailing rural character. So, as I say, that really does demonstrate that, particularly this again is an A and B location, that in looking at these particular sites, we have to bear in mind that even if it may be perceived as being an infill, that doesn't automatically mean that it's acceptable. We do have to look at the characteristics in each area. And as Robert has pointed out, there was a social appeal, a claim for costs in this case, which was also dismissed, where the inspector again sort of commented on this point that yes, infill is not something you can necessarily give us a single definition to and say it's always applicable in every situation. And here it's we're able to demonstrate that the particular pattern development would not be appropriate. And as I say, the claim for cost was refused. So again, I think it's a useful decision that shows that we can allow development in clusters, we can allow it to occur, but there can be a point at which, enough is enough in a particular location.
I think, sorry, Chairman, through you, I think he said there wasn't actually a cap on the number of houses. There isn't a quota, but he did say that you get the feeling, as you say, enough is enough. Is that the correct interpretation?
I think that's it. Is to say he didn't, because it's a guideline figure, and we've had this discussion on many other villages and settlements, and obviously the issue of what the community does not want can be a factor in looking at how that figure might be exceeded. So it's not a cap on development, but it is one of these situations where, yes, we do have to look at what is the defining characters of a village or a location, take into account what we've already approved, what's there. And it's a good situation of saying this, if you approve a site on a road, that doesn't mean that's a precedent to say you must approve the next site on that same road. You have to look at its context. And this, I think, is quite a useful decision, particularly where we have these lot of settlements in South Shropshire where yes, they are very dispersed, and we have a policy that allows for infill. But clearly, if you then infill every gap in that dispersed settlement, you then change the character of that settlement significantly. So, as I say, yes, it means bear in mind the policy. It's important, but again, it doesn't mean it's always a green light for things to go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. Right, date of the next meeting, short time's flying by now. It's October the 5th is our next meeting. Yeah, we've got the next, that's right, the 20th is the next meeting regarding business, but after that it's the 5th of October. Right, I'd like to thank you all very much for your input today. Difficult decisions that were made. Thank the officers for all their hard work as usual. Thank Kim and Amanda, and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.